I've been thinking a lot about getting started with social content,
Okay.
and I'm very much enjoying the idea of like the founder led side of it. You're not necessarily selling the product per se, but the journey of it and the idea of piece or the idea of the brand. That I'm enjoying. I'm just like, where do I start so it isn't all patchouli incense and peace signs, because it's actually not about that.
Yeah.
And then what it is. So yeah, that's the bit that I can't quite imagine, because I would like to imagine that the people that are into peace don't use social.
It's really dangerous to make assumptions based on our own behavior, right?
Yeah, even though
And
I
like
use
like
it.
yeah, but like you were saying to me before, like you're almost purposely. I mean, when I was saying what phone I use for filming the second angle and everything, and you were like, I almost purposely have a not defunct phone, but an older phone and that sort of thing. So it's not something that you naturally gravitate towards the tech side of things. Am I right? Or
What I do like is the more lo-fi element of social, which seems to be happening, because social to me, like Instagram, seemed to get so slick and polished that it then became a bit anodyne, and then all Instagram feeds sort of looked a bit similar and the same, and it's like, ooh, I don't really like that. So I'm enjoying this more in the moment capturing of said experience, whatever that
yep.
is.
Mm-hmm.
And with clothes, I'm totally fine with it. Quality, fine. Fabrication, fine. All of those things, actually, I've no problem with. And then just trying to straddle those two.
Have you come across the Dunning-Kruger curve?
I have heard about that during COVID, switched off as a result because of the people that were saying it.
Well, so just as a yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that it fits perfectly for when I set out setting up Barnfield nearly 5 years ago, when I was like, I've had suits tailored. I know what that process is like. Of course, I'll be able to set up a clothing company. And you have that full confidence in your naivety because of your naivety. And then as your knowledge develops, you start going, oh shit, I don't know anything about this. Like, I'm clueless. And it takes that time to overcome that again, to get into a place of mastery where you have the knowledge. And that's where you are with the clothing. Like you're well and truly you're well and truly out of the naive phase. You've set up your own clothing company. You've gone through the process of selling it. You've now been consulting to other people about their clothing and fabrics and production. So you have all of that knowledge. So you're well and truly in the mastery of that. And I think that with the social side of things, you're out of the naivety because you've experienced it and you're in that place where it's overwhelming because you're like, there's so much that I don't know, and I don't know how to wrap my head around producing this content that people are going to connect with. And I think that it's it's not particularly easier as you go on. Like the post that you sent me on Instagram was talking about Marcus Milione, who I think we spoke about in the last podcast, who's running
Yeah.
Minted. And he's one of, if you look at the Heaton brothers, obviously with Represent. What's the other one that they did the whole documentary? And those guys cruise around in Rolls Royces.
With Cole Buxton.
That's the one.
In there.
That's the one. So it's similar. You have these documentaries, these real kind of behind the scenes founder documentaries that are showing the struggle. And you can film those things yourself. But I was just talking to Amy about this last night. And I was saying how when I, during COVID, bought a £300 broken down pizza delivery bike, and the intention was to vlog the process of restoring that and modifying it into a cafe racer. I did 3 vlogs all the way up to actually receiving the bike. And then once I got the bike, I was filming, but the headspace that it requires to do the job of restoring and modifying this bike when I'd never done it before. So you don't have a framework. You're not like, right, today I am going to do this, so I can really easily wrap my head around what we're going to film. And okay, I won't be able to film this part myself, so I'm going to need to pay someone to come in and film that, but it's going to be worth it because this is the footage that I'm going to get. Unless you have that clarity around exactly what you're going to do, unless you have a full-time videographer as part of your team, it could be a huge waste of money, because you could set out to do something and then your supplier doesn't deliver the fabric, and so that day's a write-off. But it's the struggles that people connect with as well. So it's a matter of filming as much as possible. But I want to get down to the bottom of, because I think you know what you need to do. The founder-led stuff really is, it's what people are looking for, that transparency, that authenticity. You're able to provide it because you have the knowledge around the production of these clothes. You're able to provide that story really clearly, but there's a block somewhere. And whether it's filming it, whether it's editing it, whether it's seeing what the finished story looks like before you start, I'm not sure, but we need to dig into that.
I came across my old blog when I started Album. I had a blog which was behind the scenes at Album, and that was me in factories, obviously still images. We're talking 2005, and it felt very. Oh, it was very good. I mean, they were just random pictures, but people really liked it. People really enjoyed it. There were two things different about that, or maybe there was one. We had a store, and it was up and running. And even in that up and running process, there was lots of learning about it. It wasn't the first year of Album. There was something, and it was almost like it was based around something. It was like factory to store, and that was the window into inspiration, idea, creation, store. So there were those.
Yeah.
And now, because it's in a way earlier, it's not sort of there. And there have been so many conversations. Oh, and I wish I'd done this when I was having lengthy Zoom calls with David, who's an art director, about what piece is. They would have been interesting, but they're kind of done. I think I feel like I'm in this middle bit, or not this middle bit. I'm in this phase where there's kind of everything's out, and this conversation is all that there is at the moment before things lock in, and it's like we're going to be doing a photo shoot in August, which will be the first kind of bits. So then there's something to capture, because actually the school run, or the frustration of doing this, I mean, maybe that's the frustration of doing the school run, which feels like it's taking me away from doing the thing that I really feel like I should be doing to move it on. They're the frustrations, but they're also the frustrations of a parent doing the school run, but they're quite, it's a different thing, if that makes sense.
It's a totally different. It's much more on you as the founder than it is about the brand and the production and the behind the scenes, and it feels vulnerable because you're putting yourself out there. It's not your physical retail location, your factory. These are all shields that can protect you and your sense of, you're like, I'm part of this. And where you are at the moment, all of that's stripped away. So it does feel incredibly vulnerable because it is just James and your idea.
So, okay, to that sounds really interesting, an idea when there is something, but not to put it out now, because people don't know whether it's now, as of the date it is to date and time it is today, or in 6 months. Like in
No, but what happens there, and I'm talking from experience, is that you gather the footage, and you're like, okay, I'm just going to park that footage over there because I'll get to it when I need to. And then your brain's moved on, and you're like, like if I edit that and put that out now, that's not going to make sense for it. It becomes very overwhelming because you're trying to take into account what you're doing now and what you needed to communicate from 6 months ago as if it's now. So you can do it, but you have to be incredibly organized and look at that footage and be like, right, this is what this needs to be edited. Or alternatively, that you get the footage, someone edits that for you, and it's ready to go. Then you can park it. But don't park it unless it's edited, because you just need to be able to push the button as well. And it's just there's too much going on, because this is the thing, you're not just filming and editing and figuring out the story and what it is that you're trying to communicate. You're also overseeing the production of the clothes, setting up the retail shop. You're actually doing that stuff. So in fact, that's what I was going back to just last night when I was speaking to Amy, and I was saying I've finally got to a place where I understand that I can't film it and edit it myself. I have to have somebody to do this for me. And I think that there's huge potential, because if you look across the board, well, we were able to say Minted, Cole Buxton, Represent, and there will be other people doing this as well. But to the standard that we're talking about, it's an open field. It's almost at the place where social media was coming in, or blogs were coming in, or podcasts were coming in. It's the platforms exist, but this format of letting people in behind the scenes and having a mix of raw iPhone footage that's showing those moments where you're just like, the fabric hasn't come, or it's not quite right. And then, those really kind of like in the moment, there's the authenticity, there's the transparency because it's genuine. And then having some B-roll in there, so that it's aspirational and it's attractive and inspirational, and you have this mix. That, I think there's very few brands who are doing this at the moment.
So to that, you have to do it in real time.
I think that you have. The ideal is to be doing it with a maximum like a 2-week lag or something like that, because again, like the reality of filming it, editing it, and putting it out, even if you're overseeing that process in amongst everything else, if you want it to be done to a high standard. And again, though, whether you need it to have the high production value in there as well, especially, it's quite authentic to be showing it without that at the moment. Like Peace is in a position where you're developing it. So be that kind of like more kind of punk attitude to it, where it's just like, we're just getting this out there because we want to connect with the community. Then when you launch and you have your retail space, there's this sudden and obvious difference between the setup phase, which was primarily iPhones and vlogging process, to then bang, high quality, high production values, because now we're selling stuff and we can afford to put that money into marketing. And there will be this very clear delineation between the two, and it's a story arc that people can follow.
Interesting. 2 things there have come up.
Mm-hmm.
Community, searching for my notebook. I've forgotten the second one. First one being community, connecting with the community with Peace. And with Barnfield, I feel like there's the bike, or there's the vehicle. There's a vehicle of a type. That's what it feels to me from having the conversations. In your mind, it's probably moved on, but when I think of Barnfield, I can picture 3 people. You are one of them, who I would go, that's the avatar.
The Barnfield man.
Yeah, the Barnfield man. With Peace, I'm still trying to imagine that. And actually, because I've picked a name that has a connotation, and I remember having a conversation with a friend of mine who was a total eccentric, and we were talking about the people that we really admired, and he made these ultra light. He lived in Japan. He was a sculptor turned product designer, or the other way around. But he made these he made these bags for bikes, for road bikes that folded up into like the size of a fist. They were like, so they looked like a sculptural tent, because in Japan you can't take a bike on a train unless it's in a bag. But bike bags are really big and bulky, and they lived in Tokyo, and they'd go riding like every morning.
Yeah.
But there's nowhere to put these big bulky bike bags. So he made this thing, and they could carry it on their shoulder, and it was pretty cool. And really, really clever idea. And we were talking about all the people, his inspirations and sort of mine. And we got to this word of, hippie and bohemian. And bearing in mind, I lived in Brighton for a long time. So hippie gets a bad rep amongst many people for being the opposite of what we felt that a bohemian hippie was, which was a rigorous, committed individual living the life at the highest possible way that they could, and expressing themselves in the thing that they did. Steve Jobs being one, Warren Buffett being another. All the people that really excel at their chosen thing, they've gone out and done it, and there's this discipline and this rigor and unconventionality to doing what they've done, but they've succeeded at the highest level, because if you follow what everyone else does, you'll probably get the same result as everyone else, but a little bit more watered down. So, but then peace has an instant connotation with one way of being, which is the Brighton hippie, and you wonder actually what they do, and it's all love and light, but nothing gets done. And my view of what a hippie is, which are actually the people that go on and do really good things.
But I like that, just to butt in, I like that because there's almost like this, once you've engaged with the brand, you have this eye-opening piece of knowledge, like, I thought they meant this with peace, but actually it means this, and that makes a lot of sense. Everything that you were talking to last time we spoke. And it feels like that's almost like a gateway into a community. It's almost like secret information. You're like, oh, well, if you're wearing peace, it's because you understand this is what peace means to us.
Yeah. So I think coming back to that being like the Barnfield man, or a physical thing being a bike, or a bike or a vintage car or a vintage Porsche, whatever it is, I will bastardize what it is, because it's your thing, not mine. Then with peace being that thing of what that thing is, that's that kind of hook. And I remember chatting to one of the chaps at Finisterre way back, who defined their cold water surfing idea, and it was all about the tent. They had this green army tent that would be on beaches in like Greenland when they were surfing or wherever, and it was like this kind of army tent was the symbol of cold water surfing, had its log burner inside, all these like beardy frozen surfers coming in from cold water surfing, and it was like, that's the thing. When you make it all about bikinis and summer swimwear, cold water surfing suddenly stops making sense. And so having that like thing, what that thing is, and as we've spoken about, like big into tennis at the moment.
Yep.
And but then also when you become that thing, I think I'm really anti becoming the thing. Always have been. This like, I play tennis, but I am not tennis. But then some people, like, they're all about the thing, and I think my reluctance or protectionism is over not being the thing. Like doing the thing, but not being the thing, because I find that very limiting personally, and I know for others it gives them a real anchor to identity. And I've always gone through life going, don't be the thing, do the thing, don't be the thing.
Yeah. But you will. There's a lot to unpack there. First, what I would say is that of all the people who bought the Lawrence jacket, I think 30% of them ride or are into bikes. So even though I had that at the core of what I was doing, there was something else that people were connected. The majority, the other 70% of people, and maybe the 30% who had bikes as well, were connecting with. And I don't think it was the bike. I think the bikes, the cars, they are indicative of one element of what makes up the Barnfield man. And the timing of this is really good because I was looking at this on the treadmill this morning, and there was almost this click where I was like, I've constantly been trying to create the avatar for who is my target audience member, and I can say, they're a man aged between 35 and 55. They're white collar employed or self-employed. They're going to be management, or they're going to run a consultancy, probably an architect firm, maybe some sort of creative element to it, but that kind of like creative from a design element rather than creative from an art element. There's probably an element of kind of counterculture there. Yes, you might find them at a cricket match, but you'd be more likely to find them at a boxing match. There's all this sort of stuff. And I was like, but something's not right. Something's not kind of cohesive there. Something's not clicking. And it was when this morning I started to kind of look, almost like looking behind the curtain of all of that stuff. And what is it that really connects these two ideas that I've developed recently, which was the one, that the Barnfield man is a gentleman, and all the style icons that we were talking about last time, and where are today's male style icons that fit more just from clothing, but in terms of their approach to life and that confidence without being arrogant. So there's that, and then there's this tagline that I've developed of, if everything you want is just outside your comfort zone, why the fuck are you still wearing sweatpants? So I was like, okay, how do these two things that seem quite separate connect? And the person who's going to connect with those is someone who is very aspirational. They're very driven, and they're looking to life from an aspect of personal growth. Yes, there is aspiration in all the ways that we look at it, like wealth and all that sort of stuff. But the reason they're not going to be driving around in a Lamborghini, a brand new Lamborghini, or a Rolls Royce, or something like that, the thing that separates, and they'd be in a 1977 Aston Martin Vantage or something like that, that speaks to who they are in terms of they're driving that car because they're saying, I'm driving this car because I understand cars. I understand this is a driver's car, and that speaks to who I am more than just I have wealth and money and I've spent it on this product. And so it's like wealth being demonstrated through achievements and character. And having identified that is what I was looking at the dominoes number 2, 3, 4, 5 before, when I was looking at everything else, and having identified what is the emotional connection that someone will make with Barnfield. And it's this brand represents me as a person who is aspirational and who is driven by personal growth and characteristics and that side of things. There's where the emotional connection comes in, and then everything comes off that. So there's where the bikes can be part of that, the cars can be part of it, but they're tributaries off the main river, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I think the way I've always operated is like do it and evolve it as it goes. Sometimes, though, Mark, I just don't want to be talking. I think I get there. It's like actually do it, do the thing, put it out.
Just do it. Stop thinking about it and just do it.
And let other people do the talking.
And this is what we did talk about last time, about how, again, there can be a stumbling block there because of A, what we just talked about before, the vulnerability, and B, how important it is to you. You know, there's this, well, I want, it's scary to just do it because I'd rather know that everything is aligned first. I've got all my ducks in a row, and now I'm communicating step 1, step 2, step 3. But it's also remembering that not everyone's going to join your journey from day one. So very few people can have that sequence aligned.
Yeah. In an ideal world, I just put it out, open the store, put it out. I believe in the curiosity of humans. They would find the store, they would talk about it. Old school word of mouth. And then you don't have to do it in the same
And
way. So that's probably
they will. I think it's just appreciated that there's a glass ceiling to that. You have an amplifier through social or through email or through founder videos. It's an amplifier for whatever you're doing. If go on.
But do you need that?
It
depends. The glass ceiling.
If you've identified this is how much I need to sustain the lifestyle that I want to live, and I don't want to go beyond that, I totally resonate with that. I'd much rather be small and influential rather than trying to create scale. That's not what I'm into at all. But when you're doing something that's niche, that's going to attract a niche audience, you need the amplification to reach as many of those people as you can, because there's, say, 1 in every 10,000 people are going to be into your brand. So the further your reach can be, the more likely you are to create that small pool of people who are going to be into your brand. We can keep talking about the social side of things, and I'm very happy to. I think we should maybe revisit it each time, because I'd love to help go from this place of overwhelm, where I feel like you're in two places at the same time. You're overwhelmed, but you just want to fucking make it happen. And it's like, how do you kind of like bridge that gap?
Yes, in one way, the way I would tend to do it is go, what's absolutely necessary?
Yeah.
Cut everything else until it gets to the point where it becomes necessary. Because I do believe, and this is personal experience. Everyone, when we opened a store, and it might be change the word store for social media account.
Okay.
Right?
Open whatever it is. Yeah.
Photographer dropped in, stylist dropped in, that all these things just dropped in that we didn't have access to through knocking on doors and trying to make those connections. But all the doors opened. And there were some things that we did beforehand where the doors opened and we took them, like going to see Wink Creative and meeting Tyler Brûlé. That was on an ad hoc, me just wanting to expand my phone book. We opened the store. He walked in on a Sunday and said, "Oh, I didn't realise you had a store." The Monday, Monocle Film Crew comes in. Every month for the next 2 years, we were in his editor's letter, and then boom.
See, there's something about having a store which creates that, which says we're here and we've put our money where our mouths are, and we've invested, that social and websites don't do. Yes. So I was saying about
review that next time.
Well, yes. Let's, because I've forgotten what I was going to say about it anyway. But I think that
we were talking about stores and having, like, that's my experience. And interestingly,
yeah,
your experience is social and the success of what can that do, because that's my experience is having a store in an ideal world. And maybe there is something in here which was an idea where actually you both pitch in together and then you just cross these things over because. And then one will sink, one will swim. They might both swim, and then you're like, oh my god, this is more than we can handle. But you keep that going. But
well, the last thing that I was going to say there, what I did just remember is that you were saying about like almost like what's the minimum that you need to have in place, and that we can talk to very quickly. So 9 posts on your Instagram feed if Instagram is going to be your main social platform. And what I would say is, yeah, you might be able to pick up people on Facebook and Twitter and elsewhere, but focus on one social media platform at one time. I'm just about to close down the Facebook page that I've got set up for Barnfield because I think there's about 140 people following. I've never paid any attention to it. It's just Instagram feeding into Facebook, and all that's happening is that I'm missing comments. Yesterday, I logged in for the first time in however long, and I saw someone had said something 43 weeks ago that I haven't responded to. So it just looks awful. And he was one of our customers as well. I made a genuine point about perhaps making our samples not in black, because it's very difficult to see the features and everything. So that's great. That's great, and it's engaged, but I missed it, and it looks awful, and I feel awful for not doing that. So 9 posts, that fills your grid, basically. So do that. Website, or at least landing page with an intro, the stuff that you've been telling me about peace.
Yeah.
That intro. And a sign up form. Sign up to, it's not just sign up to know more, it's sign up to be on our wait list. So you're creating that. And this makes it sound like, I was going to say fear of missing out, which is an element to it, but that puts it in proper marketing speak. So yeah, so you're developing that interest, and then having at least a minimum of 1 automated email that gives people more information about peace, because they've bothered to sign up. I feel like you need to show those people respect for the fact that they've bothered to give you their email address. And I appreciate that as much as someone stepping into a store, especially a boutique store where the founder or the owner is probably sat behind the desk. That's always difficult to step in, because you might just walk out there being like, I don't want any of this, but you don't want to offend the founder behind the desk. So to me, it's the same thing. So those are your 3 things. And in terms of who I would do that with, obviously you've got Instagram for your social platform, and then for your landing page, it depends on how much control over the design you want. To me, design is very important, so I either start from scratch, or I would use something like Squarespace, which is easy to use, but overkill for a landing page. But you can expand out from it. At least you've invested in the one platform, which is probably about $280 for the year. And then something like Email Octopus, which is, I think, free to send 2,000 emails or something like that, or up to 2,000 people. So it's not emails, it's up to 2,000 people. So there you have your kind of, that's your MVP, your minimum viable product on digital.
Yeah. And somewhere I read, I think it was in that oversubscribed book, having like 7 touch point, like you need 7 interactions or 7 with someone before it.
So so Daniel Priestley's then expanded on that and said, well, it takes 7 hours to go from someone being an acquaintance to being closer to being a friend, 7 hours of contact. And so his whole idea is to have at least 7 hours worth of content that people can binge on to make that connection. Now, I saw that in action because I've read Daniel's books, I've watched him on YouTube, I've been to a number of his webinars, and then I followed him on Instagram. And then a couple of days later, I was scrolling through Instagram. One of his posts came up where he was talking, and I was like, there's my mate Daniel. That was what came to mind. And of course, he's not my mate, but that was what I felt. So it's absolutely true. So that's where your founder videos that we were talking about before really are invaluable, because of the connection that it makes with people.
Yeah, that's interesting that it's 7 hours. It's quite a long time, isn't it, when you think about, because
how much content?
7 interactions. Yeah, like if it's an email, like a 7 hour long read is a long old email. you know.
It is.
So
And
it's,
so there's where having multiple touch points makes sense as well.
yeah,
Because if you've got 30 seconds on TikTok, you've got 20 seconds or say a minute on Instagram, you've got 20 minutes on YouTube, and then you've got an hour and a half podcast that we're just recording, it adds up quite quickly.
yeah. Talk to me about TikTok then, because you haven't mentioned that. But
Yeah,
then you just
so
mentioned it, but
well, I think it depends on the type of content that you're creating, and we did speak to this a little bit last time in terms of if you are creative, if you're quite happy to do that, speaking to the camera, and you're providing either education or entertainment, then TikTok is your place. If you're trying to put high production value stuff into TikTok, it is not your place. And I think in part that's because TikTok really came to prominence during COVID. And we were all at home. We didn't have the ability to do high production value stuff. I mean, it started just as like people dancing, sticking up their iPhones and dancing. So it has a very different culture. And I think that that's something that I started running social media for my clients in 2008, right at the very beginning. And it was essentially the same content went on Facebook, Twitter, wherever. Now it's much more understood that there's different cultures to each social media platform. Instagram grew up through photographers who were really the first people on there who were making the most of it. So that's where this high production value, lack of transparency kind of developed on Instagram. And it was about beautiful imagery, which I still crave when I go to Instagram, and I don't get nearly as much, but that's what I'm looking for when I go there. I'm not looking for it when I go to TikTok. And I don't know how the brain switches from one social media platform to another, but it does. And I will swipe past high production value without even looking on TikTok, but I look for it on Instagram.
that's interesting. I mean, I guess it's like going to McDonald's. You know what you're going to get, don't you? So you
Yeah.
with different places.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's still a good one, but it's more lo-fi.
TikTok's a great one, and it's totally misunderstood by so many marketers and so many individuals because they see it as the app that little girls dance on, and perhaps they still do, but the demographic that's growing on there the most is your 35 to 55-year-old. So, if you think about the channels that I look at on TikTok, the rest is politics, the news agents. Like I'm following the Met Office to see what's going on with the weather. I'm using TikTok, but in a very, I think I was born in 1981, so I'm right on the cusp of Gen X and millennials. So I think that makes me a Zennial or something like that. So, and I think I had an analog childhood and a digital teenage onwards. So I think that's how I'm using TikTok. That's obviously not how everyone else is, but the fact is, those accounts exist on there that do resonate with me. And so if they resonate with me, they resonate with the audience that I'm looking to sell to as well. It is worth it if you have the time to do it properly and consistently, because that's one thing that TikTok is it's voracious. It wants to really figure out what's going to work on TikTok. You ideally want to be posting 3 or 4 different types of content every day, so that you could get that data back and be like, what worked, what didn't. Okay, let's dig in deeper into what did work. But the fact is, it lends itself to putting out that much content, but whether you have the ability to do it or not.
But it can be more lo-fi, so it doesn't
Totally.
need the high production value. So it can be more behind the scenes.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's more about your ideas than just than about the production value. What have you got to say? How are you going to connect with me? And again, that's where it really comes down to: are you entertaining? Are you making me laugh? Are you making me go, what was that? What did I even just see? Or are you educating me? So I'm learning more about the brand or how a brand runs. I think that TikTok, I will definitely be posting what we're doing here on TikTok, because
yeah,
this is
which seems
great
like it makes
educational stuff.
sense. Yeah, because it's the podcast. Like you can take snippets and put them on. So that makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Well, but again, like this conversation just seems more, and I guess that's why we're doing it. I think they're more interesting to me because it is the behind the scenes actually of what we're doing. It's part of the behind the scenes, because actually the things that I find really straightforward, they're almost not, they feel like they're not worth capturing because it's just what I do. Like it's done before you've even thought about it, because it's just what you do. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, and it's tough to get yourself to capture it because of exactly what you just said. Like, I just had 40 meters of Melton wool from Hainsworth delivered, and as I was walking towards the door, I was like, I should set up my camera and just get taking this delivery on camera, but I didn't, and so now I don't have that. But that could be. I mean, it's incredibly heavy. It says 41 kilos on it. I reckon it's closer to 80 or 100.
41 dead weight.
It's not. No, because if you think about two bumper plates, two 20-kilo bumper plates.
Fabric's so unwieldy, though.
Oh my god! I mean, it's in a solid roll, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's closer to 80. That would probably be interesting to someone seeing me bring that in and struggling to bring it in. But you don't think to do it because you just say, oh, it's just fabric. I'm just taking a delivery of fabric.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think that's where you need two people, isn't it? Like, because if you had someone that's just like they can do it in real time, but then so where my head at is like, where are not, and they're not quick wins because that's to devalue it, but where does it come with ease rather than, because the moment it's laborious, it becomes very difficult to do. Like this actually is this conversation that we're having, because you're editing it and putting it together. It's amazing. It's brilliant for me. But they're interesting conversations because as much it's talking to someone that's going through a similar thing, which I think you need that. I think we need that as human beings. And I've written a bit about peace actually, because it's all about conversations. Like, none of the products have been designed. Nothing's designed in isolation, which everyone thinks everything happens. And I don't know if you've had this, but you go to a factory and they're like, "So what's your design?" And it's like, "Well, I mean, it depends what you do." But there's an assumption that it just pops out, and that actually it's preformed. It's like, okay, so what are we making for you? And you're like, "Well, I've just come to see what you do." And the idea will come from that with a loose thing that's in my head.
Yeah.
But it's very, it's binary. And it's like, we're factory, you make.
Yeah. What are your capabilities? And okay. So, I mean, this will be perfect. This will be a perfect segue into talking about the sweaters briefly. So when I first went to go and, I went to go and visit the factory. Who are only about 45 minutes away, and they, I've seen their work, and they do beautiful sweaters. And so I went there to make that connection. And before I knew it, I was putting in an order for a sample. But I had no idea what their capabilities were, what the sort of thing was that they produced. But so it can work in two different ways. But that resulted in a sweater that I was not happy with, which is the one that I showed you first time around.
This is the first one. Have you found, as a segue, or as a footnote, side note, have you found that when you go to a factory, like when you started Barnfield, you had a kind of a clear idea of what you wanted? This is what I want. You go to the person that's going to pattern cutter, tailor, however you did it. And then you see it and go, that's not what I wanted. And then you start that process. Have you found that? Or do you start with a really clear idea and then you just work that idea through?
Well, I'd say a bit of both. And I think that works to what you were saying. Because the Lawrence jacket, I started it off, it was a single layer. So it was the organic cotton gabardine, and then it was organic cotton lining as well. And then that was when I started to develop it when I was in Bahrain. Then when I came back to the UK, and I was like, you're not going to get nearly as much usage out of this jacket if it's just single lined. Perhaps I could quilt it. So then I started to look at the process of quilting it, and then of course the pattern cutters needed to be like, well, sure, but that quilting is going to add an extra thickness, so we're going to need to grade it, maybe create it half, change the armholes. So there's this symbiotic development. Yes, I have a very clear idea when I start out a project. The peacoat that I'm working on at the moment, I know exactly how I want the lapels to sit. They should not be too wide, they shouldn't be too small. They should curve out and be pressed properly. I want it to sit so it hangs in a way and feels in a very. I'll know the minute I get a sample back whether it's right or not. Whether I can communicate what's right or wrong in that moment is something I'm still learning, but I can feel it in my gut as to whether it's right or not. But the process has to be in partnership.
Mm. And did you think it would be like that when you started?
I had no idea. I think because I say like the first check that I ever got for the first website that I did with my digital marketing agency, I took that money and I went straight out and got a bespoke suit made. So that was my experience with clothing manufacturing, was on a very individual basis. And I think I went into this process with like, well, how different can it be? And then I got my face slapped with just how different it could be. And there's been a huge amount to learn. So I can't say, just as a clear answer as to whether it is as I expected it to be, because I didn't even know a pattern cutter existed. I think is the answer to that. I didn't even know that you needed one.
I think it's an amazing business, and it's probably the same with all of them. I just, for some reason, butchery just popped into my head. But how there'll be complexities in butchery which just seems like cutting meat, but there'll be there are so many, and how there are so many layers to everything, and how they're just ignored, even by the people that's in them. I was choosing draw cords yesterday. Went to a draw cord factory, huge factory, or huge building, and all they make are different forms of draw cords, of which this isn't even,
Yeah, sure, it's just a handful.
And they make elastics, and and you say to them, because it's different people's tastes and ideas and perceptions of what that thing is. You're like, okay, I want show me some, because most factories don't have a good showroom. They don't really have a taste level. They do the making. So you ask for something and then you see it and you're like, can I see, what else have you got? And then they show it and it's this slow unfolding, because they don't want to let you in to look through when you could just flick through and go, that one.
Is it because they don't want to let you in, or just because they don't have that? I'm looking for a black drawstring, lycra polyester, whatever it is, with branding here. Here you go. Here's one we created earlier. Rather than, well, here's a flat half-inch style with, bonded plastic at the end. Or would you rather a tubular one with metal at the end? This is what we do as well. There isn't that salesman esque side of things. It's just we make.
Yeah, it's very much in that way. And then you have all these, when people are listening to this, and when I say to other people, when you think about a garment, when it's of a certain level, everything that you see has been a decision that's had to be made. So that that fabric has taken a minimum of 3 months to be made, not including that Melton, the time it took for the sheep to grow the wool on their bodies. And so this chain is just so long and interconnected. And then people have an opinion on it and go, is it sustainable? And
Yeah.
You know, it
Yeah.
kind of is. I think
And also, at what point?
at what point, and I think probably this is to go back to the original bit about social, you can start to, the more you experience an industry or something, the less you realize you know, and then you're like,
Dunning-Kruger.
There's no point in entertaining this conversation. Not this
Yeah.
call. I'm enjoying this call, but the conversation of sustainability, because you know, we can unpack this and repack it and unpack it, and at the end of the day, it's like a moral conundrum dilemma that someone has to.
That's also touching on the sustainability side of things. That's why I always come back to what's important to me. Where do I see sustainability? Because it is so complex and impossible. If you're going to create anything, it is impossible not to have an impact on the planet in some way. But if you can consider some elements, what's your CO2 footprint? You know, are you using pesticides? Are you not using pesticides? Whatever's important to you, then at least I think it's worth touching on to an extent. And that, it is that side of things is important to me. And I think that's why I've come to the realization that you can't be entirely sustainable. And I think it's only people who haven't really thought about it that believe you can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back to the sweater.
Back to the sweater. So this first one, and I'll have to describe it for anyone listening, not watching. My microphone keeps on wanting to fall over. Right. So this was the first thing that I came out of there with, having gone into the factory with no idea that I was going to commission a sample. And so had I have known, this isn't what I would have come out with. We looked at the collar doesn't sit as I would want it to. That, looking at the length of the body, I think anyone who knows would know that that's based on a Japanese block. When you look at the grade of the gauge, sorry, it's quite a thick gauge. I think that was a 5 gauge or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
which makes sense for that factory because they export a lot to Japan.
Yeah, and
so their experience of it goes into something that they haven't told you, because why would they? Because that's what they do.
And because I wasn't providing the direction, because I didn't know I was gonna need to. But the opportunity was there, so I took it. But what you can see is you can see the quality of how it's constructed. So as much as I wasn't happy with the shape and the pattern and various elements, what I could pick up on straight away was the quality of the garment, and that works for me as the foundation. If the quality had been bad, I wouldn't have continued on at all. I wouldn't try to fight. You're never going to make, one thing that I've learned is you're never going to make a factory see things through your eyes if they don't. Like they produce low quality items, they're never going to produce a premium quality item for you. So that was premium. It just wasn't my style.
Yes.
And funnily enough though, because I felt awkward in it. I feel awkward in a short, boxy style like that. But funnily enough, when you put it on, when you were over here, I thought it looked really good on you, and you're taller, but it's still, so it's so subjective. These things are so subjective, but I have to, and so because of that, the way I approach it is, does this work for me? Am I proud of this? Can I stand behind this? Yes, therefore I'm willing to put it out.
Yeah, I hear that.
Second option was this was the second one. Now, did I?
Yeah.
You wouldn't.
I
have
saw
seen
this. I saw this.
Did you see this in the flesh? Did you?
Yeah, saw this one in
Okay.
the flesh.
So what I found with this was that much nicer. If you look at in terms of the proportions, just having that length in there is much nicer. It's also in a 7 gauge rather than the 5, which makes it much finer but a nice
Which
structure
basically
on there.
means 5 gauge is 5 needles per inch, 7 gauge is 7 needles per inch, so you get more yarn in the
Nice.
inch. So
Yeah, and it's made out of a British wool, and it's a 2-ply British wool. Now, what was interesting is making it out of that British wool. It smells lovely. You've really got that. Each their own, right? I really like that kind of lanolin sort of smell, but it is still quite itchy, quite scratchy, and with that, the drop on the neck is still it's almost the same as the back, so it's almost that kind of oval shape again,
but
even
better
though it's
than the
flatter.
navy.
Yes, and even though it was flat, it's flatter here, so that was better. But there was also, it broke quite a lot here. There was a little bit too much, or quite a lot too much fabric across the chest. So, third sample. And what I've realized is that knitwear is not an exact science, because I asked for that to be short. I asked for them to make it shorter by a couple of centimeters, and I think it's ended up being shorter by 5. So we're not quite at the Japanese length, but it is shorter again. But that drop is much better. Hard to see in the navy, but the drop's
looks better. Looks better. Is it a bit wider? Have you?
Yes.
Is the
Yes.
width
So
of the net?
again, not by request. It should be 19 centimeters. This is 21. Now, I asked why they did it, and because on the grey one there was some pulling at the back, and so to avoid the pulling, they made the neck wider. Which, if I'd been given the choice, I'd have said no. Make the shoulders wider so you can keep the neck the same. Put the thread count into the shoulders. So that's actually sample 4 is underway with that, going another couple of centimeters longer, closer to the grey one, because the difference is this is in a merino wool to get rid of the scratchiness.
Yeah,
and
it looks nicer.
And it's got
on
a
screen.
Totally different feel to it. The reason that I made the grey one, the reason I made it shorter after the grey one was because that British wool, it's much tighter, much more structured, so it kind of grasped you, and then it had funny lumps and bumps. It just looked too long, whereas in the merino, that length will be right. And also change the fashionings completely, so there's much less fabric across the chest, and so you don't have nearly as much break on the sides. So we're much closer with this. I think that we'll probably be there with the next one. But the real question was, I've been looking at branding options, and I think we spoke about this last time, and how I have quite a strong sense that you should be the main event, not the clothing, which is why I don't have massive logos on anything. In fact, the only logos on the jackets are inside and etched into the buttons. So it's very, very subtle. But I also appreciate that if you take away any branding at all, you take away people's opportunity to demonstrate that they are part of the community that I'm so adamant about developing. So I am keen on doing something, and I was looking at maybe one idea that I was looking at, but I'd be interested to chat through ideas with you, is it may perhaps even, the standard thing would be to embroider a logo and something. Sure, I could do something small, like I've always liked how small the All Saints logo is when it's embroidered on knitwear, or potentially something more like a thin leather fold around patch down at the bottom, so it's something slightly more unique. Another suggestion was, because these will be done in the brand colours, so there'll be a navy, a claret red, and a British racing green. The other colour is this kind of antique brassy gold, which could be just within the cuffs or the neck, so that it's hidden inside. Now, I'm not a massive fan of that idea, but it's an idea.
Do you mean by that knitting it in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just within the inside. It's not visible on the outside, and it's almost
Yeah.
that kind of like, if you know, you know.
Yeah, which knitting in you could do on the back neck. You could do on the neck trim. You wouldn't be able to do on the rib, on the cuffs or the hems.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a big fan of the knitting in.
Okay.
The
I think I've always just had an issue with like, when I like my boxer shorts plain, just a plain black boxer short. If you stick, so I've never been into like the Calvin Klein ones with it around the band, and even if I have like if there's a white line within the elastication or something like that, I'm not a fan. So I don't know whether it reminds me of that, which is why I kind of pull away from it.
Well, I think you then don't see it. That
Yeah.
like if it's integral to it, then you don't see it, which I think's quite nice. I mean, there are many things that you can do. Funny you were talking about underwear, because I've decided to do underwear because why not? And then the branding question, but partly because one of the shots that I want for the shoot is this ASMR, like the sound of putting on and taking off clothes. And
Yeah,
jeans
okay.
buttons have a certain sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I need something underneath the jean when we film it. And then I was like, well, we should do our own underwear because we can. And then it's like, and it should be branded because you're going to see it. So then what do you do branding wise? Because you're going to do it. So my things have always been, actually, if people are going to wear something of yours, brand it. And you can choose how to brand it. So on our garments, we have three. I've intentionally put 3 points of branding on every garment.
Yeah.
One is a bean stitch, which you don't really see, of a P. So it looks like a hand stitch, but it's tonal and it's in an odd location. Like on the t-shirts, it's covered by your arm. It's like just near the side seam, so you don't really see it. On the jeans, it'll be on the pocket, but it'll be tonal to the denim. So again, you don't really see it. Then we have our woven label, which we've embroidered onto the garment, so it's integral to it and it's flat. So that's always on, and it tends to be on the back, like the jacket you saw me with. That's on the back of the garments, so you don't see it from the front. What's the third one? On the jeans, obviously we have the jeans patch, and we were talking whether we do it subtly or overtly, and we've actually gone for having it overt because you might wear a belt over the top of the jeans patch. But all of these different things, each one adds a cost.
Yeah.
But I think the cost of the branding is worth it unless there's a story sufficiently within the yarn and certain things. Like backnet labels a must. I think there are certain things, certainly with knitwear, I would reverse the neck trim so you get the inside seam on the outside, which just gives a little bit of detail that shows that it's not Marks and Spencer's. And then just so that's that consideration, because that's a skill to remember, that the factory has to go, no, we put this on in this way.
This is different.
So all of those things.
Yeah.
So you can do those things. But I think branding's, I love it. I think it's really amazing. And we're doing a either brass or acetate, like a Mazzucchelli acetate pebble that will go, that's CNC'd, amazing factory that's like super high tech. So they're machining this brass pebble that will be a zip pull, or on the back of caps, it'll be the instead of the Velcro, it'll be some cord, like a custom climbing rope that will pass through this bead, which will be painted, like enameled. So I think you can have loads of fun with branding.
Agreed. Yeah, and I also think that because you have the experience, would it take you 4 or 5 samples to get where you want to with a knitted sweater? I would say no. And so the headspace is there to be able to apply to the branding side of things.
Almost, I disagree. I'd say possibly, and possibly not, because depends the pace with which you're moving at it. And I found making decisions on one's own tend to be rushed. They're either rushed or really slow, and then the kind of the conversations missed just because there's no one to reflect back on. So I mean, God, it's taken me so long to do jeans, and then I'm like, oh no, and this is me with my experience, they'll come, the factory will come to me with a question. The factory never comes to you with a question or a query. They just do something, and you're like, that's not what I asked for. Then you go back to it, and it's a constantly iterative process. So I actually think that's just the nature of it, and actually how important people are in that. So I think you're doing pretty well with that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I definitely didn't expect it to take me. It doesn't surprise me because it took me 7 to get to the Lawrence. So it doesn't surprise me that I'm on 4 with the sweater, but I'm very pleased at how quickly things are moving, because they used to work with a freelance knitwear designer or technician, and he would come in once a week. Whereas now they've got someone who is technical, actually doing, overseeing the knitwear, and he's doing the pattern development as well. So he's able to move much faster than if it was in that way. So that's nice. And especially over the summer, it means that I can be developing it over the summer in time for launching into Q3, Q4. Q3 is just around the corner. But yes, so what have you said you had some product in, some samples.
What have I got in? Like denims, fleece jersey. A lot of it now I've sent out for things like final branding, and then our shoot. I mean, our calendar wise is all shot to pieces, because I wanted to shoot this in January, February. We're shooting it in August. Much to the chagrin of Lucy. It's like, oh, this is taking forever. You're dragging your feet. I kind of am. I feel like I'm kind of not. It's just going to go out when it's going to go out. And of course, I won't put into production heavyweight leather jackets for high summer kind of thing. So I'm like, okay, cool. And going, actually, I'm going to do underwear, and I'll be comfortable with a store with jeans, underwear, jeans, boxer shorts, white t-shirt. I'm good to go.
Nice.
Like,
I'm
kind of happy with that, as I am with jeans, white t-shirt, leather jacket, bag. Yeah. Like, none of it really matters, or hoodie or whatever it is. But I've just put into work a baseball cap, because that was part of the picture in my mind of the dad who I based this first collection off. So that was kind of a thing. That factory is really cool. But my conversations have been really about branding, actually, and just what and where.
Yeah.
Because I think the position of it is really important.
Yeah.
Because if it's, say, on the chest, it becomes really obvious.
Mm-hmm.
So where can you put it? And I wrote down earlier, I was just thinking, like, what piece is simplicity, consistently actioned at a high level with a splash of playfulness. So the branding adds the element of playfulness, because we've done this white label, like, I'm going to with me. Oh,
where's I have a Barnfield equivalent. I don't know where it is. I wanted to hold something up as well.
Yeah. Which is then embroidered on.
Yep.
Like this.
So it's all the way round, and it's that,
It's completely flat. It's embroidered.
Mm-hmm.
On fleece, it also goes on the back.
Nice.
So, for example, that tank top, that's kind of on the back. So you don't really see it. Can you see that? I've got my...
I can see it there, yeah. Yep.
And then this P...
colour-coded, so same colour.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so you probably... That's a little sense of discovery, because you won't really see that. But that's on all the garments.
Do you know what popped into my mind when you were talking about the playfulness and the branding, and then also there's the tennis side of things that is driving your aesthetic element of it as well, to an extent. Like, is there something like where you would only see the logo, for instance, during a serve. And so that's where the logo goes. Or you would only see the logo as someone comes around, for a backhand, and it's there, or something like that. So there's a playful tie-in.
Yeah, possibly. Doing other styles I've added in are like a tennis kit, because it makes sense, because I can do it. So we're doing 2 takes on a PK polo shirt. One that's a bit more like Agassi inspired from the 90s, and the other one that's more of a classic polo. And that will have like piece, like they used to have like their sponsors on their sleeve.
Yeah.
So there'll be a series of sponsors kind of on the, the branding will be stacked on the sleeve.
Nice.
For that specific top, it might well come off for production, or it makes 2 styles where you can have it branded or not branded.
Yeah.
But I think branding is just so fun. Like you can.
Which I don't. I guess I don't get to play because of the way that I've that I brand so minimally. But I enjoy seeing it in other brands for sure.
And I was the same. I think I often think of myself as actually not a bit too serious, but I like the playful things, and then it's. Yeah. Often I can catch myself out because I want it to be so serious and clean and nothing on there, nothing visible, that you kind of take it off. And actually, I quite like it, because I'm also doing a suit.
You've got to lean into what works for you and where your sensibilities lie, right? And I don't. I mean, you can see in the last podcast, this podcast, I don't wear branding at all. So. Yeah. Again, we were talking last time, if I'm going skateboarding, I'm wearing my skate t-shirt, and that will be covered in branding. But as a general rule of thumb, I don't. So it wouldn't then make sense for me to be creating a brand that was suddenly, highly covered in logos and brand. But I still, when you were talking about like the tennis players with the logos, and then I was thinking about like with F1, the shirts that they wear with all the logos, and there's something really very cool about that, but it's trying to do it so it's not pastiche is too rude a word, but you know what I mean. So it's not like dress up. But it's part of the design, and it's integrated in there.
And I think I quite like racing drivers of old, because they do well. In fact, even modern, they do feel like they're just living this amazing life. It's that kind of thing. It's doing something at a high level.
I'll send you a podcast that I listened to that was breaking down some of the most entertaining stories of the F1 drivers of old. And it was this whole idea of like, where's all the character gone? And I think it's been scrubbed out because of health and safety and PR and all of that. When you hear the stories, I can't remember who it was. It wasn't Jacques Villeneuve, but it was that sort of time. And he snuck like 10 laxatives into his competitor's drink just before the race. He didn't end up drinking it, but he was quite prepared for him to drink it and then just be out on the track just absolutely shitting himself. So that sort of character's been lost, but then I think that's why we hark back to it so much.
Yeah, I think there was Eddie Irvine as well, wasn't there?
Yeah,
like there was a good crop, and I think that's probably why. That's certainly the world that I remember. But branding seems to be... I think there's a place for it. And even with these labels, we'll do it as a black on black.
Yeah.
So you then don't see it. So it can be on the outside, because we're doing some tailoring as well. And then that will go on the outside. So
I was wearing it this morning, actually, into the gym. When I first started, I was saying I set up Barnfield as like this initially Deus. As a competitor to Deus. And so I did this, and because we were going to take one of the motorbikes and turn it into an electric motorbike, I did this logo that was Barnfield in a big, solid kind of sans serif font, and the I was a lightning strike. And I mean, it sounds awful, sounds like AC/DC or something like that, but it worked really, really well. And I did a T-shirt, and it had Barnfield printed, that exact thing, bold across the whole back, and then like in rows, so there was 5 of them stacked on top, but it was black print on a black T-shirt, so it's this big bold logo and text and font and everything, but it's very subtle in its production. And I saw that, kind of clocked it in the mirror as I went past, and I was like, that looks really good, that black on black.
Yeah, I think with all things, there are ways and means. Just because we were talking about this the other week about it not doing content just for the sake of like using some music, but I think they're like doing things to remain relevant in the marketplace. Doesn't mean you have to compromise all ideals, but you can have these things that are just recognizable to those in the know. Otherwise it's super covert, and then it's
which is and that is that community side of things, and it's that beyond community, it's that kind of club and exclusivity. Like, I get it, I know this brand. Do you know Barnfield? No, I've never heard about Barnfield. Well, you're missing out, or whatever. And the same with Peace. Like, you know, look at this lining, look at this logo, look at the way they've done this black on black.
So I think it's important, but it was because it was Marcus that mentioned branding on knitwear. I think they're kind of obvious things, and it doesn't necessarily mean logo, but I would look around the neck trim, something that's integral to it, because then it's not applied on top of.
It was Marcus who mentioned about using that, like either if you have the navy knitwear, using the claret red within the collar, and it was kind of expanding on that, being like, okay, well, I have these 4 brand colors where you have these new ones, the navy, the red, claret red, and the British racing green, but that antique brass or gold has always run through it. So,
nice.
Can that be, or can it just be, just embroidered, just a line embroidered or something, something. It's got to have purpose. Why would it be a line? Would it be 3 lines because there's some sort of military connection or something like that? I can't do anything like that if it doesn't have a story, if it doesn't have a purpose for me. So I'd need to think about that.
But there's loads of stuff, like you could have a ghost patch on there, a ghost patch. Like you could knit that in. You could reverse that round on the sleeve.
Yeah.
Where you would have put your insignia, and you can just mark out that.
Where it would have been.
Where it would have been.
Yeah. And that stuff is fun to play with. But you have to go and pick up your son.
Yes, I do. Until next week.
Yeah, well, this means that by signing off properly now means that we'll actually sign this podcast off. The last one just ended abruptly, as the Zoom just cut us off. It just ends. So we'll chat again next week. In the meantime, we should look at getting you over the hump. I don't get me wrong. I can talk to you about it in terms of social media and publishing something. But then, actually, no, we do have that MVP of like kind of 9 posts that represent Peace. And you start, because I've seen your mood boards. You have started to put that sort of stuff together.
I think there could be something done very easily. It's whether that is the right thing, and maybe I'm overcomplicating it in my head.
It can always be removed. But if you have it, you have a home for Peace. We get your Instagram so that there's something, and on each post you can have an element of what you've been talking to me about. So it could be like that those 9 posts could be a sequence. So you read one, then you read the other, and you read the other, and then you get this whole idea, this start of an idea of Peace.
Yes.
And then there's the clicking through, and we set up your landing page, and we set up your email marketing.
Yeah.
So those are the other thing to think about is what content you will want to communicate in that first email. And it could be 3 emails. Don't limit yourself to 1. I'm just saying, as an MVP, it needs to be 1 to welcome them on board and give them more depth into the brand. So we any questions on that, just get in touch, whether it's this week or whether it's next, or whenever it makes sense for you to move things forward.
We'll do.
Let me know.
Yeah, well, I think this week it needs to happen. So that would be a good step in the right direction.
Yeah,
so I'll be sending.
Get in touch and we'll move things forward.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right.
Until next week.
I'll save and send these through.
Perfect. All right. Speak to you soon.
Ciao,
Cheers,
ciao.
James. Bye bye.